Inland temperate rainforests are among the rarest ecosystems on Earth. In British Columbia, they are populated by soaring hemlock and spruce, subalpine fir. These are hundreds of years old and more than 100 feet tall. These old-growth forests are also endangered themselves because of encroaching development from timbering and increasingly from the wood pellet industry. There is a debate in British Columbia about how much old-growth forest is actually left in the province. The official number is that there is 51,000 square miles of old-growth forest left in British Columbia. And that may sound like a lot, but a trio of scientists that I interviewed that came out with a report recently have studied the data very, very closely. And this is government data, satellite data, and they've looked at how much old-growth forest is left in British Columbia. And what they found is it's not 51,000 square miles, it's about 1,500 square miles, or instead of 23% of the land mass in British Columbia, it's less than 1%. The biomass industry in Canada, particularly in British Columbia, argues that it is not a threat to these old-growth forests, that what it uses to make pellets are trees that have been damaged by the mountain pine beetle, or trees that have been damaged by wildfire, or lumber mill scraps, that they're not actually taking whole trees. This is an argument that the wood pellet industry uses in different parts of the world. But those things are in short supply, and they've been gobbled up in the early years of this industry. And what's left now really are the standing forests. And so there are NGOs and there are environmental groups that actually go in and track the action of the loggers that are taking wood to these wood pellet mills. And they are documenting that, that they aren't just taking dead trees, they aren't just taking lumber waste, which is in steep decline. They're actually taking whole trees, trees that are hundreds of years old, that make up these old-growth forests. And they are taking their plants and they're chopping them up and they're turning them into wood pellets to be burned for energy overseas. Wood pellets are a relatively new energy source. Over the last 10 years, companies have sprung up that are cutting down trees and turning them into wood pellets, not to be used in backyard stoves, but actually to be used instead of coal for energy in enormous coal-fired power plants. And this is taking place in the United Kingdom, across the European Union, and increasingly in Asia. Throughout the southeastern United States and increasingly across Canada. One of the reasons that this is an attractive energy alternative is because of a mistake of sorts that was made in 1992 during the Kyoto Protocol, when biomass, or burning wood for energy, was classified as carbon neutral, or zero carbon, on par with solar energy and wind energy. There was this belief that if you cut a tree down, and you burned it and let go of all that carbon, as long as you planted another tree in its place, that the carbon that tree you cut down released would be absorbed by the new seedling that would grow and grab all that carbon from the atmosphere. This is this carbon neutrality designation that is enabling the wood pellet industry to really take off around the world. There's a problem with that, though, and scientists have looked at this very closely. And while there is carbon neutrality, the carbon neutrality doesn't take place for 50 to 100 years until those trees actually grow to maturity. One of the things that scientists have been trying to get across is that new trees, newly grown trees, do not sequester a lot of carbon. It's not until a tree gets to be 30 or 40 years old that it really starts to sequester a lot of carbon. And this is the value of old-growth forests, particularly the ones in British Columbia. So they not only are home to these really special species and these incredible ecosystems, but they hold 30 to 50% more carbon than smaller trees, than secondary trees. Now keep in mind that an old-growth forest is exactly that. It's been around forever. It's what's known as a primary forest because it's been left undisturbed. And we just have fewer and fewer of those left in Canada and left in different places around the world. So the question really arises, is it too late? Is it too late for these old-growth forests, for the 1,500 square miles of old-growth forests that are left in British Columbia? There is this progressive government in Victoria that is really looking very hard at coming up with a old-growth management plan. They've got some difficult decisions to make because all the timber and a lot of the wood in British Columbia has never really been off limits to the timber industry and increasingly to the wood pellet industry. And so they're going to have to decide whether they are going to put laws in place by the end of this year that will protect these old growth forests. And really, it's for the first time in a generation that there is a government in place that is not so pro-business and so pro-timber, that is actually willing to consider an old growth management plan that will possibly preserve these old growth forests that are left in British Columbia, not just for Canada, but really because of the ecosystem services that it provides for the entire planet.